Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending where you are. I am Quinn Wisson from Vertical Measures, and I'm here hosting our monthly webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Life After Launch: How to Keep Your Website Fast, Discoverable, and Secure, and will be presented by John Go and Jim Bader. John is our special guest today, coming from Skyhook Interactive, where he is a principal and creative director. Skyhook is a design and development agency here in Phoenix who builds high-performance marketing websites, and I can attest personally that they do a great job at that. Jim is one of our own here at Vertical Measures, and he's our Senior Director of SEO Services. He has over 15 years experience in SEO and e-commerce worlds, and he oversees our whole search engine optimization team here at VM. Before we get started and I hand over the presentation, I just have a few housekeeping items to note. Today's webinar will be available for viewing by tomorrow, and I will go ahead and send everyone an email with a link to both the video and the slides so you can watch it and review it and also share with your team. We'll also be happy to answer any of your questions. So if you take a peek at your webinar interface, you'll see a little question applet where you can send me anything you'd like me to ask Jim or John at the end of their presentation. Also, you can tweet along with us and ask questions that way. We use a specific hashtag for these webinars. It's hashtag VMWebinar. If you have any technical problems, let me know or just sign off and sign on, and that usually fixes the issue. So I think those are all my notes, so I'm going to hand it off to our presenters, Jim and John.
Thanks, Quinn. Appreciate the generous introduction. I'm very excited to be here with everybody today. I wish I could see you, so I felt a little less like I was talking to myself, but we're going to have some really great information for you guys today, and Jim and I have been working on this for a little while. We think that the stuff that we're going to talk about today is so essential to good internet marketing. Some of it's fundamental, you know, this is the blocking and tackling of digital marketing. It's having your website not only out there as an effective brochure, but as so much more. You know, this is now the hub of all of the content work that you're doing. It's where all of your customers see you first, and I feel really strongly that having this right, having your website right, and right in these important ways, fast, discoverable, secure, is the most important thing that you can get right. So we've got plenty to cover today, and so we're going to get started. We'll probably move pretty quickly, but we're looking forward to your questions, and certainly please interact with us here on the webinar, on Twitter. We want to hear from you. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Again, I'm John, and Jim's going to be here. Jim?
Hey, good morning. How are you doing, everybody? I'm glad to be here.
You guys can tweet directly to us or using the hashtag that Quinn gave you. So why does this matter? Why do you need to be discoverable? There are almost 1 billion websites on the internet now, and that sounds like kind of a ridiculous number, but just think for a second. Every time you Google something, Google can spit out 16 million results in less than a second for a pretty general query that you have. You're only ever going to look at the first page of that, and let's be honest, you're not going to go to page 2. Instead, you're going to go back up and modify your query and get a little more specific if you need something that it's not showing you right there. So you need to be spending your time and your energy making sure that what you have is discoverable. You need to be fast. Your website has to be really fast. People expect your web page to load really, really quickly, and so the statistic here is that 47% of people expect a page to load in less than 2 seconds. And that's insanely fast. That's faster than about 70% of the internet, but people have that really high expectation, and so if you're not there or even pushing up against that speed, you're going to be losing conversion rate because people are going to be bouncing off of your site. And finally, you need to be secure. If your website gets hacked, then people who are finding you online, instead of seeing all of the thing that you've put so much money and hard work and effort into, they're going to see these red screens, these warnings from their search engines, and they're going to bounce away. That's dangerous to them, and they're going to leave. And so you have to stay on top of that to make sure that doesn't happen to you. So how are we going to do that? Here's what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about what you need to do when you launch your website. What's fundamental? If you've already launched it and you're coming in a little late, then hopefully that this will be the set of things that you go and you do right away. Today, tomorrow, in the next week. How do you take care of that? Then we're going to talk about the things that you should be doing on a monthly basis. So that's going to be just your every month. What are you getting in? What are you looking at? How are you reviewing that? And then how do you go not from month to month, but then every 6 months or so and look at a strategic, more broad overview of what's happening there. And then finally, we'll wrap up with SEO for ROI. How do you get that low-hanging fruit? Jim, anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm ready to go.
All right, here we go. So let's talk about what you need to do when you launch. We'll go through each one of these things, and then, as Quinn said, these slides are going to be available for you to look at the links that we're sharing, and we've got some resources kind of packed in here. So make sure you go back and take a look and click through here. Jim and I talked about this, and we agreed that the first thing, maybe the most important thing you do when you launch your website or when you're about to launch your website, is get some tracking software on there. We recommend Google Analytics. It's free, it's awesome, it's incredibly powerful. It integrates with the rest of the Google suite of software. That's AdWords and Search Console and those kinds of things. You have to track what's going on in your website. If you're not tracking it, then all of the rest of your efforts may be incredibly effective, or they may be completely ineffective, and you'll never know because you're not in there looking at it. So throughout this presentation, we're also linking to some plugins. We're mostly a WordPress design and dev shop, so these are going to be WordPress focused. There's lots of other options here. So when you go to put analytics on your site, what you want to make sure you're doing, the plugin does all the heavy lifting for you. It puts the code in the right place, and makes sure it's fast, it's make sure that it's connected. But you have to go through the process of getting that tracking ID on there, and sometimes that's a little tricky. So just wanted to show you really quick where that is. When you open up your analytics view, you can go in this top UI, you go to the admin section. There are 3 columns, and the second one is property, and then you need to get this UA code here out of the tracking code section. So if you're using a plugin, you don't need to worry about any of this code stuff. If you're not going to use the plugin, you can just copy and paste this into the proper section. But this is the code that associates your analytics account with the activity that's happening on your site, and that it's really important that those 2 things match up. Otherwise, you're going to get a 0 reading, and you're not going to know what's going on the site. So that's step 1 of analytics. And then the other thing you have to make sure you do is set up goals. So goals are used in analytics to understand how a user came onto the site, their behavior while they were on the site, and then where did they convert. So that conversion could be they ended up at the thank you page after submitting a contact form. It could be an e-commerce conversion. It could be any number of things. And Google Analytics is powerful and customizable in that way that you can track those things. But you need to make sure that those are set up, because you're going to want to start asking questions about that data. And the first question is going to be, what is effective, right? Where is the traffic coming from that converts? What do they do on the site that makes them convert? Jim, anything you want to add on analytics?
I would just say, as we go through some of these ideas of like low-hanging fruit, it's really critical that you have a baseline and have something to compare to, so that you know exactly what changes are working for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So making sure this is set up early on and immediately, or if you're going to be launching a new site and you've got this baseline to check it against, how's my new site performing against my old site, that's when this data becomes really actionable and interesting. Great point. And I would just say to put a pin in that, the foundation of good marketing is good measurement. You can't, none of the rest of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is going to be really as effective as it needs to be if you're not measuring it well. So let's take a few minutes and talk about SEO considerations. Jim, why don't you go ahead and take that on?
Absolutely. So when we look at SEO, a few of the things initially that you want to take a look at, obviously you built your website to be a marketing tool, and part of that is search engines have to be able to read it and index it in order for it to work for you. So you want to watch out for any of the types of technology that might limit that indexability, so like Flash or iframes, if you're incorporating any of that. Make sure that whatever hits the web page is readable. You want to make sure that all of your important pages are in your main navigation of your site, even if like in the footers or at the header nav. All the search engines have to get to all the important pages. Also is internal linking. From if there's an article that references your services, make sure that you link to your services within that content. That also helps. And an XML sitemap is a must. And on the next slide, we'll go a little bit deeper in that. This is definitely a best practice. The search engines gave us this this way of giving them all of the URLs on our website in one package. So it's a way of getting them there before you have to wait for them to index through every page of your site. And there's a lot of attributes that you can designate to your pages, like the last time it was modified, how often you're going to update those pages, and what is the priority level in comparison to the others. The other best practice you're going to want to take into account is any place where you might have duplicate content. So some of these are often in WordPress are the category tag pages, author pages, and here's a step-by-step instruction on how you can activate and install the Yoast SEO plugin, which makes all of this much easier to manage. So that you can control all your titles and meta, how the URLs and content are structured on the website. That's very huge, and also control your meta robots tag within that plugin. Next slide, John. So let's take a quick look at the anatomy of what a well-optimized page looks like. So arguably the most important element on page is the HTML title. You're going to want to put all of your important keywords in here. It should be within 70 characters. After 70 characters, it's truncated in the search results, so you want to watch for that. It's still the verbatim words that are in this tag are your best chance of ranking. So be very judicious on what goes there. The meta description has no effect on the algorithm anymore. It's more of a marketing tool. So there's 160 characters that show up in the search results, and you should write this in a manner that entices the searchers to click through from the search results to your web page. And of course, as we talked about in navigation, your page has to have great UX. Google is always modifying their algorithm towards user experience. So they want to deliver searchers to quality pages. So your content should be very user-friendly, and it should be engaging, and it should be aligned with what the title and the description offer them. You also want your pages to be responsive. Mobile's a huge part of the algorithm now, and that experience and that speed on the mobile side are something that you're definitely going to want to take into account. Next slide, John. So this has to do more with the strategy. So some of the things that you're going to want when you start targeting keywords on your pages is be very specific to the content. One of the things that we see with our clients that we have to kind of undo is what we call cannibalization, and that's down there in that section entitled Don't. So what you don't want is multiple pages that are going after the same keywords. When Google sees this, they're left with the best match for that search, and you're leaving it in their hands of which one they're going to show. sometimes if it's too ambiguous, they won't show any of them. Next slide, John.
All right. So we're going to jump back. That was a lot of SEO stuff, and now we're going to jump back into some more of the just on-page kind of user experience stuff. And these were in that first slide, that outline that we have. So we're going to bounce around a little bit. One of the things that we find often overlooked is the 404 page. So this is the page that people see when they try and type in a URL, or they follow a link from another site that goes to your site, but the link isn't right. The URL, it can't resolve on that server. And so instead you'll get a 404 page, or a file not found is what that means. And what you can do is you can make that on brand, and you can make it informative instead of just the default, which is, oh, you screwed up, sorry, try again. And a lot of users won't know what to do when they end at that 404 page. It's kind of like, so if you have a sign on that page that says, hey, sorry about that, this got messed up, why don't you try these links instead, that can become a positive experience instead of just a dead end. And then the other thing that you should do is you can go back into Google Analytics and look at those 404 results, and at least in WordPress, it'll show you what the intended link was supposed to be. And so you can see where that's coming from. If that's an offsite link that's wrong, you can go and say, hey, you guys are linking to me, but that's not quite right. Here's the correct URL. Or you can improve the link structure internally if that's happening on your own site, just to make sure people aren't ending up in those dead areas. Another thing that is really important when you're just starting out is to get your social sharing tags correct. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, Pinterest, all of these social networks spend so much time and energy making sure that they can suck in content from all over the internet. And you can help them do that, and you can specify what kind of content you want to share by using this, what's called schema, or this code, to identify those correct elements. So this is an article that was on TechCrunch, and because they've said, okay, we want to use this picture as the thumbnail, and here's the title, and here's the description, here's all these things, across all of these different social media platforms, they've been able to control what gets shared out. And that's what you want to do, right? If you're going to be in control of your brand, you want to be the one that's saying, okay, when I'm represented across the web, these are the kinds of things you should show. These are the kinds of things you should say. And you can control that with this open graph technology. So if you're using WordPress, you can use that Yoast SEO plugin that was mentioned a second ago, or there's open graph plugins there, and then Twitter actually has other information that they include above and beyond the open graph, which is kind of the web standard. If you include the Twitter stuff as well, then you can include other images, or the card, what they call a card. So there's some more options there. Okay, this is a really big one. Having an SSL certificate on your site, have it installed correctly and configured. If you're doing e-commerce, you know this already, you need to have one of these things to have secure transactions online. And what SSL does is basically encrypts all the traffic between your computer and the server where all the back and forth is happening. So it's always been essential for e-commerce to have secure transactions, and it's now a search signal. So Google is looking at that, and they're saying sites that have this security protection on them are better for users, and we're gonna give that extra credibility in the search ranking. Jim, do you have any insight on that you want to add?
Yeah, the SSL has been something that Google's been kind of threatening with for a few years, and now we're starting to see that they're really picking up that rhetoric. So it's one of those things that if you have the ability to do that for your site, do it as soon as you can. For some of the bigger companies, it's much more challenging, so it may take a while. So it should be definitely on your radar.
So usually your host can help you with this, and we've included a link here on how to do that. You can get them free now. SSLs used to cost about $100 a year or something like that. There are free options now. And there's really The only reason not to do it is if you're embedding content that's not secure. That will throw your users a warning that says, hey, some of this stuff is protected and some of it's not, and they won't tell the user which is which. And so that can be kind of like a scary warning for a user. But it's something that's worth checking into, certainly. Okay, forms and calls to action. I think forms are the unsung heroes of websites. I think this is the most important, least considered part of most marketing websites that I see, because the form is the interaction, right? So everything else that you've done on your website, all the cool functionality, all the videos, all the everything else, leads a person down to this call to action, and then often that call to action is, well, we'll just kick them over to the contact page. There's a form on there. They'll fill it out and let us know what they want. And so you've presented this beautiful 4-course meal for your user, and then you kind of just throw their check in front of them and say, where's your money? Make sure your forms are well thought out and well considered. Make sure you're asking the kinds of questions that are going to help you serve your customer better. Make sure they're not too long. Don't ask too many questions. You want to be just at that right amount to get the information you need so you can serve them well, but not so much that it's going to be onerous to fill out and they're going to say, no, I'm not going to, I'll come back later. Because the truth is they're never going to come back. If they don't do it now, they're probably not going to come back. After the form is submitted, make sure that that's either redirecting to a thank you page. That's the easiest way to do this, or that there's some other, like a JavaScript event, that you can track and say, okay, this is a goal completion. Again, we talked about analytics at first. You want to make sure that you're tracking these submissions and seeing, again, where they're coming from, off-site, what channels that is, what kind of behavior they have on site. And then finally, we mentioned this anti-spam measure. So Google's got a great reCAPTCHA, which is just one click now. It's not, trying to decipher these weird code words anymore. So that's a great option. A honeypot is another option you have, which is basically a hidden field where the user doesn't have to do anything, but a bot that's trying to fill out the form will see it and they'll fill it out. And because it's hidden, you know that no user's ever going to touch it. And programmatically, you can say, oh, that was spam because a robot filled out that form. So there's a couple options there that are really good these days that don't negatively impact the user's experience on the form. I just really want to drive home. I think this is one of those most important things that if you're launching your site, if you have the site up, go back and look at your calls to action. See what you're asking people to do and see how well thought through that is. Training and documentation, just a little plug for this. If you will consolidate all of it now, take it out of your email threads, your passwords that came over from your web developer, and put it all in one place. If they recorded any videos or instructions for you, make sure you know where all that is. Download it from their server because they might delete it. You're going to want that someday, so make sure you've kind of collected it. Automatic backups. This one is enormous. It's so important in terms of security and in terms of permanence and protecting the investment that you've made. You've probably spent hundreds of hours at the very least. You've probably spent thousands or tens of thousands of dollars building this website. It's essential that you have something in place that's backing it up on a regular basis. If that's daily, that's great. This is the WP Engine interface. They're one of the hosts that we like a lot, and we use them. A lot of the managed WordPress solutions have backups kind of built in as a value-added service. But whatever host you're on or wherever you're doing this, you need to make sure that there are regular backups being taken, and it's best if they're automatic, because you're not going to remember, you're going to forget, and then one day the site's going to go down or it's going to get hacked, and you are going to wish that you were able to roll that back 24 hours and say, man, I'm so glad that I had a copy of what that used to look like, and you don't lose all of your data. I wish I couldn't, but I could tell you horror stories about people who failed to keep backups, and they lost a lot of money and a lot of time by not protecting what they'd invested in. And then this little nuance: make sure you're not just backing up the files. In WordPress, there are kind of two different things that are happening all the time. There's the files, which is how the site looks, that's the theme, and then there's also the database, which is all of your posts and pages and forms and all those things. And they're stored separately, so make sure whatever backup solution you have is managing both of those, not just one. Okay, that was our foundational stuff. Again, there's plenty more that you can be doing, should be doing. Make sure you don't miss those ones that we just talked about. So let's talk for a minute about what you should be doing every month. You've got a monthly check-in. My personal feeling is that this kind of activity shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes if you've got this setup streamlined to do all the updates and backups and those kinds of things, and then another 30 minutes or an hour to look at your SEO and to kind of steer that ship. This doesn't have to be a big hard problem, but it is something that you should have on your calendar. So we talked about having your site secure and protecting yourself from these 37,000 hacks that happen every single day. The way sites get hacked is their software gets out of date, and there are vulnerabilities in that software that don't get patched. That's why software gets updated. And so anytime you ever have to download an update, you can pretty much guarantee that there's either some vulnerability that's being fixed or there's some small feature that's being added. With WordPress, it could be either one, but there's always some sort of patch vulnerability fix coming out. So every month you should be going in and looking at these two places. There are either core updates, which is the software that actually runs WordPress, that needs to be checked and updated every month. And then there are also the plugins. So this additional functionality that you've likely incorporated from the WordPress repository. Those plugin authors are updating constantly, again, for the same reason. They want people to enjoy their software. They want it to be bug-free. They want it to be protective. So coming in here and looking at this update screen and then saying, there's a couple buttons. So if this needs an update, it'll say update up here. Update plugins, you can select all of them and then just update all of them at once. When you do that, it's worth going back on the site, clicking around a little bit, making sure that none of those updates broke any of that functionality. Again, this is code, and it's code that's written by different people, especially if you have a bunch of different plugins. So you want to go back and kind of check and make sure that nothing has been broken or knocked out of place because something inadvertently moved. We just talked about automatic backups. Take the 1 or 2 minutes to go in and make sure that those backups are still on, that they're still working. They're always going to be working, right, until they're not. Until that one time that you didn't check it and needed it, and then they're not there. So just keep your eye on it. Okay, scan for malware and hacks. So some hosts offer this as a service. So I know WP Engine does. I think the GoDaddy Managed WordPress does. And then you can also buy this as the third-party service from other places like SiteLock or Securi. And basically what they do is they just kind of scan the files on a regular basis. Some of them do it almost constantly to make sure that there's no kind of nefarious activity or there's no vulnerable places in your code or nothing's been hacked. And you want that because you're not going to know until one of your customers calls you one day and says, hey, I can't get on your site, or they see this big red screen which scares them, or they start seeing ads for pharmaceuticals or whatever weird thing. You don't want your website to be a platform that other people are using to push their stuff, right? So this is how you protect it.
And every month you should be checking your SEO performance, whether you manage your program in-house or whether you leverage an agency. You should be checking in monthly on how that stacks up year over year. You definitely want to look at rankings, that's your opportunity to drive traffic. So whether you move up or down, you can get a pulse on how well your pages are doing in the search engines. And you also want to look at year-over-year traffic to see how much of that opportunity you're actually converting on. And then to conversions, what did people do when they got to your site? You should have a good pulse monthly of where your program is headed. And also check broken links monthly. Stuff happens on the website, run Xenu or another link checker tool just to make sure that everything's fixed.
Great.
And with page load speed, this is also a ranking factor. It actually is getting more and more important. As John mentioned, users expect fast delivery of pages, and so does Google. So you want to check to make sure that images that you're adding and videos or other components aren't dragging that load time down. And the industry standard is that 1 second of page load delay can cause a 7% drop in conversion rate. So very important.
So and I would just add, I think the thing that I see that happens on websites on a month-to-month basis that changes this is if you're active on your site, if you're posting new stuff, make sure that you are paying attention to the size of your images that you're including in your posts, your pages. Often people will download something from iStock at a really high resolution, and they'll just put that directly up into their site or onto their page. And so they'll add a 1 or 2 or even a 3 megabyte image onto this really small, light page, and they've just increased their page load speed from 2 seconds to 5 or 7 seconds, which is, as you're seeing here, a pretty big hit in that page rankability and conversion rate. So something to look at there. All right, now let's talk for just a minute about the strategic review that you should be doing. So you've got those couple things that you're taking care of every month. It's not shouldn't be a huge burden, but that's kind of how you're steering the ship. And then every couple months, just pull back out and take that 10,000-foot view. If you're doing this every month, then that's fine. There's a lot of good steering that can happen, but you also need this other kind of longer roadmap that you should be looking at. So one of the things that we're going to recommend is that there's this content review that's going on. When you're in the weeds, and especially if you've got a pretty healthy program that's doing content marketing and you're really running at this, you're in there blogging every day or every week, and a lot of times these things will just kind of slowly expand, and while you're not looking at them, they turn into things that don't quite represent you as well as they used to. So this is a homepage of a site that I found, and there's a bunch of problems with it. And one of the problems is like this navigation is really huge, and it's kind of bloated. It's kind of hard to see what am I supposed to be looking at, right? Even in this drop down, there's 3 different columns, and then within those columns there's 3 different buttons, and that can be kind of overwhelming as a user. And then you go through the page, and the content's great. Like, this is really interesting and really important for these users, but there's so much of it. And again, it's kind of overwhelming. It's all on the homepage. We're still on the homepage, and my concern as a designer and as somebody who's thinking about user experience is, as somebody scrolling through this, what do you want them to do, right? There's a big button here that's the call to action, but there's too much effort to cater to everybody, and so the vision kind of gets lost, and it's hard for them then to make a decision. There's too many options. This can happen a lot when there's a committee working on this, or you're a marketing manager and you're kind of beholden to many different people who want to have their input and say, oh, this is really important, this needs to be on the homepage, or the link to my section also needs to be on the homepage. It kind of bloats and turns into this weird thing. You got to be protective of that. You got to protect your brand in that way. So one of the ways that you can do that, Vertical Measures has put together this really great content marketing template and checklist, and basically it's a workbook that will let you walk through kind of what your strategy is and what you're doing with your content, so you can have that kind of thoughtful exercise. Jim, anything you want to add on that? I guess not. Jim, are you there? Okay, you gotta click on.
This was the whole mute thing that Quinn warned us about.
Oh, were you muted?
So I was just going to say that Vertical Measures, we promote content development with an SEO lens, and it's really important that you're always publishing valuable content that your visitors are going to consume.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. So, and then our recommendation, as designers and developers, is that you're also maintaining this strategic roadmap. The premise of this is that if you can keep your website fast and secure and discoverable, if you're working on it constantly, then you're able to protect your investment. And you don't have to redesign your website every 18 months or every 2 years because you hate it and because it got stale and doesn't represent your organization anymore. You can keep it. You can keep it alive. It should be alive. There's no reason not for it to be. So taking this more strategic view lets you do that. And so I mentioned, if you want to do this monthly, you can, but even if you want to pull it out 6 months, that's fine. Make a list of features that you think would be better, right? Like what don't you like about your site? What isn't it doing it for you anymore? How does it not reflect your current sales process or your current thoughts about the industry? And make those changes. There's no reason not to. So we're in that link that was on that last slide, you can download a document that looks like this, which is basically just a way to prioritize your feature set that you want to manage. You can share this with your developer, and they can put in kind of what their estimated costs are for this. So you can have a budget, and you can say, all right, well, every month I'm going to spend $500, or I'm going to spend $1,500, not only on developing the SEO and the discoverability parts of this, but keeping the features right and keeping building out the capabilities of my website as well as the content of my website. What we found is that if you are taking this more active view of website development and treating it less like a print brochure that's just kind of hanging out there for somebody to come and pass by and look at, or this billboard on the web, you're able to get 2 or sometimes even 3 more years out of website design. And yeah, it costs money, but this is your marketing effort, right? This is what people are seeing and how you're representing yourself online. It's totally worth it, and it's a multiplier of those content efforts that you're doing if you're also treating the functionality right. So let's talk for a second about the SEO for ROI. Where should you be spending your time for the best results?
So one of the projects that our SEO team will do for clients, once they've done the initial audit part where they take care of any of the technical limitations, and once we've put a content roadmap together and have already looked at links, one of the activities we'll do is ongoing reoptimization, and we call this striking distance. So really what this is taking a look at your rankings and finding out your pages that are between positions 11 and 20. So basically just outside of that page 1 where 90% of those clicks happen. So oftentimes you can just review the optimization on that page and make some adjustments to the title, the H1, maybe add some semantic keywords to the content. Just minor adjustments that you can do, or even adding a few more links pointing to those pages, and we'll bump them up from page 2 to page 1. And we've seen a big lift in traffic by doing this. You also want to check in with your Google Search Console. If you don't have one set up, then that's priority number 1. You definitely want that. And what that is an interface that Google gives webmasters that it's a way for them to communicate directly with them. So if they see issues with your website, they're going to flag you here. You can see if you're getting a lot of those 404 errors that John mentioned earlier, you're going to see that here in Search Console. And also Bing has their webmaster tools alternative as well. But very important to keep up on the website performance. And it's worth mentioning that backlinks are still important. With Google's Penguin update, it's people get a little jittery when you start talking about backlinks, but the reality is the internet is based on hyperlinks, and it's always going to be a factor when you have high authority sites pointing to you. It's going to be a vote of confidence for your pages. So if you can find high authority sites to get links from, it's worth pursuing. And also, one of the things that we see with our clients is often there'll be some gray hat or other nefarious activities that may or may not have happened previously, that we still see lingering effects with that. So with the recent Penguin update, a lot of that is now rolled into the algorithm, but there is still benefit to going back to some of those domains that are hurting your performance and asking for them to be removed. And the best advice that we can give is keep producing great content. That's really where the search engines are going. They are happy when their searchers are happy. What they don't want to see is searchers who do a query, hit a site, and then bounce back to the search results to change their query. To them, that's negative, and it's going to affect you. So build great content, and they will reward you with better results.
So just to kind of go back over what we've been talking about, there are these kind of foundational elements that you need to have on your site. There are just a few things that you need to think about every month, but make sure that you don't miss them, both from a security standpoint, speed standpoint, and a discoverability standpoint. And then also make sure that you're taking time to be strategic about the way you're treating your website. Don't think of it as something that you did once and now you don't have to think about anymore because you're done with your, quote, website project. Your website project is your marketing. That's how people are finding you, and make sure you're treating it like that. A lot of times we like to talk about this as like, this is your digital salesperson, right? This is how people come and talk to you. It's how they ask you questions. It's how they find out what you're doing and what you're selling and why that's important and why you're better than everybody else. And it's that role that a person used to play, and they've pushed the people, the kind of intimate one-on-one contact of that much further down the process, down in the sales funnel. And so you have to make sure that you're replacing that interaction really effectively and really strategically with your website. And then finally, Jim, I think your comments on SEO are awesome and insightful, and I think that's going to help people grab that low-hanging fruit and make that's marketing spend make sense for them. And that's where we are. So Quinn, if you've got any questions from the group, we'd love to take those now.
We do, and thanks for all this information. I personally am a web development, design, and SEO nerd, so this just fulfilled everything for me. So I really appreciate it, and we have actually quite a few questions. I'm going to try to get through a few of them here. So kind of going back to the beginning, we have a question from Patrick regarding meta descriptions. So he asked, should we add call to actions in our meta descriptions?
Yeah, I'll take that. So call to action is one of those things that you want to test with. If it's, and sometimes you can take your paid learnings and apply it organically too. Definitely the description is all about where you're headed with that call to action, because it's not really, you don't want to keyword stuff. It really should be where you're trying to entice the searcher to click through. So if a call to action you think is going to work, definitely test with it.
Okay, great. And then from Greg, another kind of optimization element question. Do you recommend only one H1 per page, or can you have multiple? I think this is again for Jim.
Yeah, there should only be one H1 tag. That actually, if you look at it like an outline like you used to do in college, that's really how it should be viewed. So there should be one H1 header that summarizes the entirety of the content, and then H2s through 6s can do those subsections under that.
Yeah, and I know we've seen, oh, sorry about that. I know we've seen with, small businesses and even large enterprise clients that this is an issue. Sometimes they don't even have an H1 at all. So using your H1s and integrating those keywords are especially important. Did you have something too, John?
Just an observation that this is actually one of the places where I think a lot of WordPress installations kind of fail. either the H1 is built in as the title element, and so you don't have a lot of kind of fine-tuned control over that. If you have to say this is my about page, and you've titled it about, it's going to make that the H1, and then you aren't able to kind of craft that as a keyword-rich element. And then the WordPress WYSIWYG, you have these drop-downs, and you can say heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and often themes treat that as more like a style controller rather than an SEO or an outline thing. And so people get caught up trying to make their page look nice, and they don't know that they are breaking their the SEO viability of the content.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I know I've worked on some themes where you have to go and customize the code to make sure that the H1s and the page titles are correctly done when you're creating that content. So that's a good point as well. So a question for you, John. When choosing a WordPress theme, what should we look for to ensure it is SEO friendly? And also, Jim, maybe you can answer that as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not always easy because there's so many. Well, frankly, there's so many thousands of themes that you can choose from. SEO friendly for WordPress themes, I think, comes down to two things. You need to choose a theme that is light and built for speed. A lot of them are built to kind of serve every function and have all the bells and whistles, and they do that at the cost of speed because they have to load all kinds of different things. So you want to make sure that the one you're getting is built with speed in mind, because again, that's a signal to the search engine. And then the other thing is, and this is maybe a little bit more challenging, but when you are looking at the theme demo or after you've downloaded one or two, load some real content into it and see what it spits out. Either run that through Google PageSpeed Insights, and it can kind of tell you, is this loading the files in the correct order? Or I'm sure, actually, Jim, maybe you can speak to this, but I'm sure there's some other tools that you could show one of these theme pages to and say, do I have the right number of, are the titles in the right place? Is my meta information correct? Am I optimized for SEO here? And I would go ahead and do that before you commit to building on any particular theme, because once you get even 10 or 15 hours into it, you've emotionally committed to building on the thing.
Yeah, and I would just say, just do your research ahead of it, and if there's any questions, definitely view source on your pages. You can actually see what kind of code it spits out. So make sure that it's SEO friendly before you roll that out across your site.
You guys had a slide earlier in the presentation on the SSL, and I know that is moving towards possibly being a ranking factor. So we have a question from Assad. He asked, you have to redirect all your pages if you have HTTPS instead of HTTP?
This is actually something that you can set in Search Console. So there's a spot where you can say, the SS or HTTPS should be observed as HTTP, and Google will handle that.
Okay, so not super.
But if you've been indexed, I mean, that's a situation where if you feel like your index is better to be safe than sorry. If you set up 301s, you can put them in place until you see that come out of the index, and you can take them away. So it doesn't hurt anything. If you feel like there's a risk, I would be safe and do 301s.
Okay. And then how about a plugin question? You mentioned all-in-one SEO and Yoast, and we got a question on, should I do the Yoast free version or the premium version? And I guess that could be applied to a few of these plugins you mentioned. What are you getting in return for paying an extra amount for the premium?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and it's obviously different for everyone. I think the Yoast premium version, if you're going to go with Yoast, is probably worth it, because that adds a lot of it kind of puts everything under one umbrella, right? So you don't have to then think about the Twitter plugin, right, that I was talking about, or those social kinds of plugins. It does a pretty good job of putting that all under one roof. And then the Yoast just sold their stuff, their analytics stuff to Monster Insights. So it's not Yoast and Google Analytics anymore. Now it's Monster Insights. I think premium plugins are often worth the money. You know, it's often like $50 or $100 for a pretty broad set of functionality. And when you put that in the context of spending $1,000 or $2,000 a month on your website, whether that's in your time or your money, that $100 to get extra insights or to get extra functionality, it really saves you that much in time and money.
Yeah, and I would just add that the Yoast Premium also includes that redirect manager, so that's very convenient when you have concerns like that HTTP versus HTTPS.
So this next question is something I'm interested as well, since we use a visual composer. So this is from Mary. She asks, are page builders like Divi and Beaver Builder not SEO friendly? They add so much extra code and short codes, correct?
That's a good question. So short codes are like the what is it? It's like a language that WordPress uses to add additional functionality into the WYSIWYG. And we use page builders too. When we are building custom sites, we built our own page builder to make that easier and to make it easier for our clients to assemble their pages. So page builders in themselves are not necessarily a bad thing. I would say the things that you want to look out for are the ones that load all of that functionality into every single page, and that's again the thing that slows it down. You want to make sure that you're not loading unnecessary assets or functionality that has to be downloaded every single time you load a new page. Page Builder themselves is not usually the bloat there. It's the template that's included, the builder and everything else.
So going on to the page load speed, we had a question from Patrick. He said, I ran the site speed test on webpagetest.org 3 different times. I get a different result every time for the first byte time. Would there be any reason for that happening? Do you guys know?
You got a thought on that, Jim?
I don't. I mean, I would have to see. There's multiple tools out there, so I would just try a few of them and see. I mean, they're directional. They all use a little bit of different way of analyzing your page. So really, just use it as a directional tool. You know, if you see something in there that gets flagged, most often it's image related, as John mentioned. So just take a look at what it's telling you, and then kind of judge for yourself.
Yeah, and I would add that time to first byte is basically a measure of your server's performance. There are a couple other things that it could be, but most often it's how the server is behaving. And where we see that is if you're on shared hosting or a shared server, and there's a bunch of other sites that are doing other things on that server. If it's a problem for you, and if you're seeing long times to first byte, then you need to get a hold of your host and say, hey, my server's not doing it for me. Either put me on a different one, or what can we do about that speed? Because that's not something that you're going to be able to improve on your own.
And then one last question, going back to heading tags, since that has been a couple questions I received. Someone asked, I heard there shouldn't be more than one H2 per page. Is that correct, or does it matter?
I have not heard of anything adverse about using more than one H2. The best practice is only one H1, and then use the other headings, you know, as needed by the content underneath it.
Yeah, and I will add too, I know we regularly use more than one H2 on our own blog content, and we actually use it as an opportunity to include some semantic keywords related to our target term, and that seems to do very well for us in drawing in traffic for those semantic phrases. So I haven't heard that either, but we do not practice that as well.
And I would say that also depends on what you're doing with those tags. So if you're keyword stuffing, you're going to get in trouble no matter how many headings you're using. Right. So it should actually describe that piece of content just below it. So that's really what Google's going to be looking at.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have. So again, John, Jim, this was really, really insightful. I got some great feedback already. So thank you for being here and for putting together this presentation for us today.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot, Quinn.
Absolutely. Thank you, Quinn.
Yeah, and we do this every month, everyone. So our next one actually is November 10th, and we're going to have Joe Polizzi on the line, which is exciting for me. He's the founder of Content Marketing Institute. I believe our CEO, Arnie Ken, will also be joining that webinar, and he'll be going over the new report that CMI just came out with. They do it every year at the end of the year with B2B content marketing trends. So they gather all of this insight, all of this data, and they get some really good nuggets out of that. So he'll actually be going through that report with us, so it should be really good. Our registration isn't open for that yet, but it will be soon, and we will also email you guys tomorrow with the slides and the video so you can review and watch and share with your colleagues. So that's all for today, and we really appreciate everyone joining us on the webinar this afternoon. Have a good one.